because he thought North Korea had launched a missile at Hawaii. And for 38 minutes, Hawaii was in a panic mode. They were sticking kids in manholes, getting under cars and going into closets. They didn't know what to do. Our problems with North Korea didn't start a few days ago or a few weeks ago or even a few months ago. Our problem with North Korea started 73 years ago at the end of World War II. We split Korea in half at the end of World War II. And why did we do that? Well, you have to go back in history even farther, back to 1910. That's when Japan took control of Korea. For 35 years, Japan controlled Korea. So at the end of the Second World War, Russia realized, wait a minute, Japan's going to have to give up some of that. So Russia said, we'd like to have that. So just at the end of the war, Russia invaded the northern part of Korea. They ended up going all the way down to Seoul. And about that time, the Allies said, now wait a minute. You can't have all of Korea. We'll give you the north half and we'll take the south. That's why we split Korea in 1945. Now, it's interesting to note that Russia put a dictator into North Korea who happens to be the grandfather of the man who runs North Korea today. That's when the problems really started. Of course, it didn't take very long. In 5 years, the Korean War broke out. The North Koreans invaded South Korea. It began on June 25th, 1950. The Korean War lasted 3 years. But in those 2 years of the 3 years, negotiations were going on to try to stop the war, an armistice, ceasefire, whatever you want to call it. But one of the big sticking points was what to do with prisoners of war. North Korea said that all prisoners of war will return to North Korea. The United States and South Korea said, no, if they don't want to go back, they don't have to go back. So here's what they finally decided. They said, okay, we'll ask the prisoners. If they don't want to go back, they will be put in a neutral zone in the DMZ for 90 days. And at the end of those 90 days, they will ask them again, do you want to go back? And if they want to, they can do whatever they want then. But they must be put in that neutral zone for 90 days. That was the final agreement that started it. So armistice was signed on July 27th, 1953. Now, that began Operation Big Switch. Went on from August of 1953 till December of 1953, 5 months. All that was the exchange of prisoners of war. They exchanged the prisoners of war at the Joint Security Area at Panmunjom. And in that security area is a bridge that crosses from south to the north. And that bridge is known as the Bridge of No Return. The bridge is called that because when they took prisoners there, they said, now if you cross this bridge, you cannot come back. So they called the Bridge of No Return. So in that 5 months, America and South Korea had captured almost 90,000 prisoners of war. Most of them North Koreans, and a lot of them were also Chinese soldiers. Almost 90,000. Well, in that 5 months, 70,000 of the North Korean prisoners said they wanted to go back, and they went back. 22,000 prisoners of war from North Korea said, no, we don't want to go back. So they put them in that zone for 90 days, and after 90 days, they asked them again, do you want to go back? Not one man changed his mind. Over 22,000 prisoners of war stayed in South Korea. Now, North Korea had captured 12,773 prisoners of war. 7,800 were South Koreans, and 3,500 were Americans, and about 1,000 British. and much to their surprise, 22 Americans and 1 British soldier said no, they don't want to go back. 22 Americans and 1 British said no, we're not going to go back. So they stuck them to 90 days into DMZ, and they asked them again after 90 days. 2 of those American soldiers said, no, I think we'll go back. So that left 20 Americans and 1 British soldier. Well, they were immediately given dishonorable discharge by the military. They didn't stay in North Korea, they went into China. They started marrying Chinese women and started raising families. But out of those 20 men, 15 of them, with their families, ended up right back here in the United States. Some of them are in this United States today. Most of them are gone. One of the men ended up in Hanoi during the Vietnam War. He was on Hanoi radio telling American troops, give up and come up north. He too went back to the United States with his wife and children. They come back to the United States and they opened a Chinese restaurant. The other 5 men were never heard of again. To this day, they don't know what happened to the last 5 men. Their families do not know. In 1968, we had another problem with North Korea. They took a Navy ship by the name of the USS Pueblo. They took the crew off of that ship and they put them in prison. That ship today is in the harbor in North Korea. To this day, it is there. They kept those 82 sailors for 11 months, and they took them to the bridge of no return and crossed into South Korea. Now, in 1976, an episode happened on the bridge of no return that almost brought us back to the Korean War again. It come within an eyelash of starting the war. What had happened was, in all those years, North Korea started a tower on the north end of the bridge so they could see what was going on to the south. Of course, we had to have one too, so we built one in the south part of the bridge so we could see what was going on up there. But a tree had grown up, a huge, massive tree had grown. So the Americans and South Koreans couldn't see very far. So 2 U.S. Army veterans, officers, went out on the bridge with 2 axes. They're going to trim that tree or cut it down. Well, it didn't take very long, and before long, here come the North Korean soldiers, about 30 of them. They come out on the bridge. They told the 2 Army officers, you can't cut that tree down. The 2 Army officers ignored them. Now, they had an agreement when they signed the armistice that when you were on the bridge, you could not carry a weapon. The North Koreans came out on the bridge with baseball bats, crowbars. The 2 Americans were out there with no weapons, and they had 2 axes. And this is what happened. The North Koreans took the 2 axes from those Army officers, because there was 30 of them. They beat those 2 Army officers with the baseball bats, the crowbars, and the axes, and they murdered them right there on the bridge of no return in 1976. Now, the president at the time was Gerald Ford. So he had a meeting with the Joint Chiefs, and he said, I want you to take that tree down. You may use all the force that you want, but you can't use atomic weapons. But you take that tree down. So that started Operation Paul Bunyan. So we had no idea what North Korea was going to do when we go out on that bridge and take this tree down. Was this going to start the war again? So the first thing the president did, America went on DEFCON 3. All bases in South Korea, Okinawa, Japan, Guam, the Philippines, all the way to Hawaii were put on high alert. They brought over 12,000 Marines from Okinawa. They brought the USS Midway off the coast of Korea with her task force. And 3 days after they had murdered those 3 men, Operation Paul Bunyan was put into play. 800 men went out on that bridge. with 2 6x trucks and 2 chainsaws. They took one 6x truck and they put it on the north end of the bridge. They took the other 6x truck and they parked it by the tree. And 2 combat engineers climbed up on that 6x truck with chainsaws and started taking that tree down. Well, it wasn't long before here come North Korean soldiers on the north end of the bridge. Busloads, truckloads. They got out, got their machine guns out, pointed them at all those men out on the bridge. Well, there was the general in charge of that operation, and that's what he figured was going to happen. So he did what we would call the rest of the story. He brought the rest of the force into action. 30 trucks came up into the DMZ loaded with Marines and soldiers. Up over the horizon come 27 helicopters with Marines and soldiers. 6 Cobra helicopters come up over. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, come F-2 Phantoms, F-86 Sabres. They were patrolling the DMZ. And if you looked up real high, you could see B-52 bombers. It took 45 minutes to take that tree down, and the North Koreans did absolutely nothing. They just stood there. And after the next day, they made a big apology to the United States and said, yeah, their troops had killed those 2 men, and they apologized. The bridge is still there today. The bridge was never used again. The bridge is there today. It's got cement barriers at each end. The tree is gone, but where the tree was is a plaque in remembrance and honor of 2 U.S. Army officers that were murdered on the bridge of no return. Thank you.